GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, and IELTS. Anyone who has ever thought of using education as a ticket to explore new worlds has heard of some or all of these names. Playing the role as bouncers to graduate and sometimes even undergraduate schools across the globe, GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, and IELTS have managed to create some major muscle and credibility. All of these are standardized tests aimed at measuring the competency of prospective students on various aspects that we'll shortly share. The term standardized eliminates variability because their administration and scoring are always consistent or standard. Keep watching as we take a quick tour of each of these standardized tests and share the differences between them for you as you get ready to conquer the international education scene. Let's start off with the differences between GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, and IELTS. The simple way of segregating them is as follows. GRE and GMAT are aptitude tests. TOEFL and IELTS are language proficiency tests. These tests are accepted by most universities around the world, and in some cases, TOEFL and IELTS also play a role in immigration or employment qualification in English-speaking countries like the UK, USA, Canada, and Australia. Universities typically specify the requirement between a GRE or GMAT and a TOEFL or IELTS. In other words, the first choice is between GRE and GMAT. The second choice is between TOEFL and IELTS. It is never between all four. As an example, you might submit GMAT and TOEFL scores while applying to Harvard Business School for their MBA program, or you might apply with a GRE and IELTS score to Harvard University's Master's or MS programs. If given a choice though, it is important to understand the differences between each of them to decide which will suit your style. So here are some of them, starting with the differences in format and pattern, scores, followed by test availability, cost, and difficulty. Let's begin with GRE versus GMAT. The two tests to get into graduate programs, that is, master's level degrees. Anyone can appear for either test, but GMAT is exclusively for business graduate programs, whereas GRE works for all graduate programs, including business and law. GRE has 3 segments, whereas GMAT has 4. The first 3, analytical writing, verbal and quantitative reasoning, are present in both tests to varying degrees of difficulty. Analytical writing measures the test taker's ability to critically examine complex issues and arguments and put forth their ideas clearly and logically. Verbal reasoning measures the test taker's capacity to read and understand written material, evaluate and communicate in a manner that is commonly used in the academic world. Quantitative reasoning evaluates the test taker's grasp on the basic math concepts of algebra, arithmetic, geometry, and data analysis, and also skills for solving problems based on these concepts. GMAT also has an additional section on integrated reasoning. It measures the test taker's ability to interpret and evaluate information over multiple formats. Both the GRE and GMAT last about 3.5 hours, and the maximum you can score on the GRE is 340. The maximum score in GMAT is 800. Both exams can be taken throughout the year. It can be scheduled at an available convenient date at the nearest test center. Details of the test dates and timings can be found on their official websites. Both tests can be taken multiple times, can be cancelled or rescheduled for a price, and they come with a limited number of free score reports. So which one is more difficult, GRE or GMAT? Though there are similarities, there are also differences between the GRE and GMAT syllabus. Don't make the mistake of assuming that studying for one will prepare you for the other. The extra segment in GMAT calls for preparation which is not required in GRE. Many find the quantitative section in the GMAT tougher in comparison to the GRE. Anyone from a STEM background might be more familiar with the quant section on GMAT. This is why if you look at the GMAT score breakup for engineers, you'll find that the quant score is generally higher than the verbal score. The GRE has a greater focus on testing verbal concepts, including the need to have an expanded vocabulary, which can be challenging to STEM students who are presumably better at numbers than words. Don't rely on these generalizations though. It's best that you look at a few sample questions for GRE and GMAT. Compare the GRE syllabus with the GMAT syllabus, and then decide for yourself if the GRE or GMAT is easier. A problem usually faced by MBA aspirants is that most B schools publish the average GMAT scores as opposed to the GRE scores. With a growing proportion of applicants submitting GRE scores to B schools, it may become the norm at some point in time to report the average GRE scores too. Till then, ETS provides a GRE to GMAT conversion tool to help understand the correlation between good and bad scores between the two tests. However, whether B schools actually use this or have their internal process of comparing GRE to GMAT scores is an open question. It's also important to consider your future career plans if you're looking into a business degree. A few industry recruiters take into account the GMAT score, especially for those applicants wishing to move into investment banking or management consulting. Having a high GMAT score would prove to be an advantage. Research your school of interest to find out if they have any specific requirements between the GRE or GMAT. We'll keep this section short. If you're still facing the GMAT versus GRE dilemma and wondering which test you should choose and why, we'll share links to each test in the description below. Moving on to the next two tests for proving your fluency in the English language. We'll now discuss the differences between TOEFL and IELTS. Both are highly reputed and widely accepted. And while there are similarities between them, there are also some distinct features that set them apart. TOEFL is usually used by higher education institutes to assess the language readiness of its prospective students. Some countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the UK also use it for immigration needs, although it's the same TOEFL test for both purposes. IELTS, on the other hand, has two distinct types. IELTS Academic is used for higher education or professional registration. IELTS General Training is used by those who are looking at migrating to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the UK. All the sections in both tests are used to evaluate comprehension and fluency in the English language for communication through listening, reading, writing, and speaking. In TOEFL, the scores from each section add up to a total of 120, while in IELTS, each segment is scored on a band, and the total is the average of the four, rounded to the nearest whole or half band between 1 to 9. Both the tests cost about the same, at $180 for each attempt, and both are valid for 2 years. The registration is fairly simple for both. It's online, and you can opt for either the computer-based or a paper-based test. You can take both tests multiple times. TOEFL lets you send 4 free score reports to your target programs, while IELTS is a little more generous at 5. Although both tests are quite versatile, most experts and ex-test takers believe that the IELTS score is more accepted in Europe, including the UK, and in Australia. TOEFL has better reception in American institutes. The computer-based tests for both TOEFL and IELTS have a similar time frame for test results. The paper-based test score reporting may take longer. So which one is more difficult, TOEFL or IELTS? TOEFL mostly follows a multiple choice format. In the speaking section, you interact with a computer. In IELTS, the interaction is with an actual person and feels much like being in an interview. The IELTS speaking section is evaluated by one examiner for every candidate. TOEFL is scored only through a centralized scoring network by an AI scoring system and multiple human raters who have no idea who the test taker is. So it's claimed to be 100% fair and unbiased. IELTS is shorter than TOEFL. So if you feel like the 3.5 hours of TOEFL can crack your mojo, IELTS is a good 45 minutes shorter. If you're asking yourself which test you should sign up for, research the syllabus and formats for each. Take a few practice tests and check out our articles given in the links below. We also have detailed videos on each of these tests. Once you get the right scores, if you need professional help with your university applications, drop us a line. Good luck.